Konnichiwa. I think that means how are you or good morning or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. And sayonara.
Sayonara. Of course, that means, I guess, goodbye.
When Johnny Carson finally stepped away from The Tonight Show, he didn't just retire, he left behind an empty throne that every comedian in America dreamed of occupying. For 3 decades, he had been the face of late-night television, the gold standard of wit, charm, and class. His show wasn't merely a program, it was an American institution. So, when the question arose of who would inherit that legacy, it became the most high-stakes succession drama in the history of television. The world watched as NBC handed the desk to Jay Leno, while David Letterman, the heir apparent in many people's eyes, departed bitterly for CBS. But what the public didn't see, what few people knew, was that behind Johnny Carson's calm exterior, behind that famous Midwestern composure, there burned a quiet resentment. To his audience, Carson remained gracious and diplomatic, offering no public comment about the transition. Yet privately, those who knew him best said his feelings toward Leno were unmistakable. He saw NBC's decision not just as a professional misstep, but as a personal betrayal, one that violated the deep sense of loyalty and respect he believed he had earned through 30 years of service. Carson's disappointment began with the way the network handled his retirement. After redefining what late-night television could be, Carson had made one simple request: that David Letterman succeed him. He believed Letterman represented a continuation of the show's spirit, a mix of intelligence, irreverence, and heart. Letterman, in Carson's view, shared his own Midwestern sensibility and deep understanding of the delicate balance required to make late-night television truly work. Letterman's late-night program, which aired right after The Tonight Show since 1982, had served as an informal apprenticeship for years. In Johnny's mind, Letterman wasn't just the best choice, he was the only choice. But NBC saw things differently. The executives worried that Letterman's humor was too unpredictable, too odd, and perhaps too sharp for mainstream audiences. They wanted someone safer, someone more commercially reliable. Jay Leno, a talented but more conventional stand-up comedian, fit that mold. To Carson, this was more than just a business decision. It was an insult. After decades of giving NBC record ratings, cultural prestige, and billions in revenue, his judgment was dismissed in favor of corporate calculation. It told him that all those years of loyalty meant less than short-term advertising numbers. When NBC ignored his recommendation and gave The Tonight Show to Leno, Carson's disappointment quickly hardened into quiet contempt. There was no public confrontation, no outburst, just distance. He stopped speaking to Leno entirely. Calls went unanswered, letters unreturned. Leno tried to build a relationship with him, hoping for the same kind of mentorship Carson had offered previous generations of comics, but the door remained firmly closed. To Carson, the damage was done. Adding to the insult were the tactics used by Leno's manager, Helen Kushnick, during the succession battle. Known for her ruthless style, Kushnick waged an aggressive campaign behind the scenes, pressuring NBC executives and leaking stories to the press that painted Letterman as unstable and difficult to work with. She lobbied relentlessly, threatening that Leno would leave the network unless he got the job. To Johnny Carson, who had always valued quiet professionalism and dignity, this was unforgivable. He saw such behavior as cheap, manipulative, and beneath the integrity of The Tonight Show. Carson had built his career by avoiding that kind of Hollywood backstabbing. His philosophy was simple: your talent should speak for itself. Watching someone use pressure tactics and media manipulation to grab the job he'd spent a lifetime protecting left him disgusted. He believed that allowing someone like Kushnick to act on your behalf without stopping them revealed a flaw in character. To Carson, it didn't matter that Leno wasn't the one making the calls. He benefited from the methods, and that made him responsible. When Kushnick later became executive producer of The Tonight Show, she implemented strict and controversial policies, including blacklisting guests who appeared on competing late-night programs. The move caused such an uproar that NBC eventually fired her. But by then, the damage to Carson's perception of Leno was permanent. It confirmed every suspicion he'd had, that the show he had spent 3 decades elevating was now being run with an approach he saw as cynical, corporate, and completely devoid of class. For Carson, though, the issue wasn't only politics, it was comedy itself. He had spent 30 years perfecting the art of the monologue, crafting every joke with precision, elegance, and timing. His humor was smart but accessible, clever but never cruel. There was always a rhythm, a polish, a sense that the man behind the desk respected his audience. Leno's approach couldn't have been more different. His comedy was broader, louder, and designed for instant reaction. It wasn't that Leno wasn't funny. It was that his style lacked the sophistication and surprise that Carson believed defined true late-night excellence. Carson's view of comedy was that it should challenge as much as it amused. Great humor, he believed, came from observation, from irony, from subtlety. Letterman embodied that ideal. His humor could be absurd, self-deprecating, or cerebral, but it was always distinct. Carson once reportedly remarked that Letterman made him laugh because he surprised him, while Leno made him nod because he agreed. That difference mattered deeply to Johnny. To him, the new Tonight Show under Leno represented not just a change of host, but a lowering of standards. And yet, Carson never lashed out publicly. He didn't grant interviews criticizing NBC or Leno. Instead, he waged what many in the industry came to call his silent rebellion. He expressed his feelings not through words, but through carefully chosen actions. One of the most revealing was his quiet collaboration with David Letterman. During his retirement, Carson continued writing monologue jokes, something he had done instinctively for decades. But when he sent those jokes out, they didn't go to Jay Leno. They went to Letterman. Letterman confirmed this years later, after Carson's death, during an emotional tribute on The Late Show. The revelation stunned audiences and industry insiders alike. It meant that Carson, even in retirement, had chosen his true successor, not the man NBC had crowned, but the man he believed deserved the throne. It was a gesture of loyalty and artistic solidarity that spoke louder than any public statement could have. Carson also made another choice that said everything about where his heart lay. The only late-night appearance he made after his retirement was on Letterman's show, not on The Tonight Show. It was brief, almost casual, but it carried enormous symbolic weight. The message was clear. Carson recognized Letterman as his spiritual heir. For the rest of his life, he never set foot on The Tonight Show stage again while Leno was host. Those who worked closely with Carson understood what these gestures meant. They were acts of quiet defiance from a man who rarely showed emotion in public. He had built his entire career on restraint and control. Yet through these subtle moves, sending jokes to Letterman, refusing to visit Leno's show, he made his feelings unmistakable. To those who knew how to read them, these were his final verdicts on the late-night war. At its core, Carson's resentment wasn't only professional, it was deeply personal. Loyalty to him was sacred. He valued respect, honesty, and fairness above all else. The way NBC handled his succession violated every one of those principles. It wasn't just about who replaced him, it was about how the decision was made. He felt that after 3 decades of loyalty, The network owed him the courtesy of honoring his wishes. When they didn't, it struck him not as business, but as betrayal. That sense of betrayal extended to Leno as well. Carson believed that comedians lived by an unspoken code. You earned your place through your craft, not through manipulation or politics. In his view, Leno had benefited from both and had done little to distance himself from the tactics that got him there. That, for Johnny, was unforgivable. And yet, even in his disappointment, Carson never resorted to bitterness in public. He didn't gossip, didn't criticize, didn't indulge in petty revenge. He simply withdrew, upholding his dignity and letting silence do the talking. It was, in a sense, the most Carson move imaginable. Eloquent restraint, perfectly timed, and quietly devastating. For the rest of his life, he never softened toward Leno. Friends who visited him in retirement said his opinion never changed. It wasn't just that he disapproved of NBC's choice. It was that the entire affair had revealed something about the character of the people involved. Something that, in his view, couldn't be undone. In the end, Johnny Carson's resentment toward Jay Leno wasn't the outburst of a bitter old man. It was the judgment of a perfectionist, a man who believed deeply in integrity, loyalty, and respect. His silence, his choices, and his unwavering principles told the story more powerfully than any interview ever could.